Hi, friends. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I am so grateful that you are here. Welcome to our spooky partial lunar eclipse, full moon in Taurus, and a partial lunar eclipse that's happening in about 10 minutes from now. October 28th, 2023. It's actually in the process of happening, and we'll watch a little live feed as we go into this report. But we are going to be talking about the image in the middle here, which is the partial lunar eclipse on this report, and the Taurus full moon forecast. So we're going to put these two reports together, do a double feature, and the intro music is actually a live stream from Lo-Fi Girl, which on the channel on YouTube that has spooky Halloween lo-fi. So I'm going to link it down below either in the comment section or in the description box, and you can go and listen to spooky lo-fi hip-hop for yourself, and hopefully I don't get dinged for sharing that. I make no money off of any of these videos. They are not monetized at all, so I don't see how sharing Lo-Fi Girl's Halloween spooky playlist is really gonna do anything but help them in some way, shape, or form. So and, we are on the cusp of Halloween here, and to have this Scorpio, Taurus, lunar eclipse at this time, and just everything else that's going on, this is really, this is a very intense and very deep, and very fertile in a very fertile time right now, and things that are initiated or driven after, possibly. And I don't mean like literally like driving in a vehicle, but the drive behind Scorpio energy that is often very intense and leads people to wanting to improve on society and civilization, and drives them to get deeper and better and more abundant in their shared resources, right? It's about communion in Scorpio, but it is an eclipse. It is an eclipse. There is a shadow that is cast upon the full moon, where we normally get strong emotional illumination of what otherwise remains hidden in our subconscious, right? We become completely illuminated in the darkness with a full moon. But with all eclipses, especially lunar eclipses, the earth is casting its shadow. And no, sir, I don't feel like that my very spontaneous and kind of tired comment about I'm ready for eclipse season to be over. I don't think there's anything genius about it at all. It's just a very tired spiritual warrior in some cases. However, I do think the connections that you made in terms of the shadow and the shadow being cast during eclipses and what is actually eclipse, now that I find to be very genius. So the thing about eclipses, it kind of forces us into a realization of a shadow being cast, that there is something to cast a shadow. And if we're going to talk about Scorpio at all, we're going to be talking about the shadow and the abyss within our own selves. And I'm telling you what, I wish I could have gotten this video out much sooner than right now, but I assure you the impact of the eclipse, even in the next couple of days, will still be very potent and strong, and it's going to have lasting effects throughout the next 6 months, I assure you. So there are other aspects about this eclipse that are just piling on the intensity, and that intensity might take over your brain and your rational thought and become hyper deeply emotional and drive you into a decision, into something that you cannot undo. And I'm very concerned on so many levels. Certainly in my own personal life, things that are within my close immediate orbit, and then of course the state of the world as well, and the fact that so much was initiated during this eclipse season. This is not a good sign, and maybe that's kind of the whole point of things being initiated at this time frame. But we're going to talk about the mechanics of a lunar eclipse, some of the symbolic and the astrology around it, and what else is going on during this time. And then we'll do the Taurus full moon forecast after. So, because oh my Taurus, it's just like Libra in the solar eclipse. And I do remember honestly making a forecast for the Libra folk and be like, this is going to be a rough time for you guys. And I am watching it, or at least aware of it, in my own immediate sphere in a few different ways. And I was like, ugh. Damn, it really was. And Taurus, it's it's gonna be something where, thankfully, Taurus people tend to, regardless if you're sun, moon, rising, whatever, if you're strongly Taurus aligned, there is a patience and a staying power of Taurus that could be a real asset right now in terms of maintaining a sense of stability, patience, even a stubborn type of patience with what's to come, because it has to go into the underworld right now. And there's something to be said by what drives us into that place in the first place, which is usually wanting to get to the bottom of something, wanting to generate power in some way. And now that Pluto's direct and is moving forward in finishing out Capricorn once and for all, I mean, the demolition machine is back on. We have this eclipse with a sun, Mercury, and Mars in Scorpio, and we have an eclipsed full moon in Taurus that's pretty much in conjunction with a retrograde Jupiter, and the fact that Jupiter is going to station direct at the very same degree that this eclipse is going to have. So we're going to look at some points in time, because, you know, astrology is a great temporal map to see where we've been and where we're going, and look at cycles energetically, so we can have some, at least some leg up, right? Some capacity to read the sacred geometry of the cosmos and how it impacts us as we make decisions moving through this chaotic minefield. So we are looking at a partial lunar eclipse that's going to be happening today. And first and foremost, let me let's look at. I want to show you what's happening in the actual sky at the moment. Let's see if I can bring up the right. Yes. So it's not just the eclipse. And as we go into the astrology chart, you know, if you're new to astrology, you're still learning this particular language, then, you know, just pay attention. I'm going to break things down as to why these things matter and what's going on. But the first thing we should always be looking at is what we can actually physically observe, right? So what we can observe is the dome around us and the configuration of our star, which is the sun. As you can see right here, it's actually, I'll move myself out of the way, and then you'll have a full vision here of this software. So you can see the sun, and you can see Mercury and Mars are both labeled as well. Now they're coming into a conjunction with each other pretty much within the next 12 hours. So the eclipse is about to happen. The sun is in the sign of Scorpio. And you can see that Mars and Mercury are very close, and they're all, you know, together. So this is a lot of fire. This is a lot of masculinity, of course. And then you have Mercury in Scorpio, which is an investigative reporter. It is that cognitive energy of our own personal consciousness, the way that we think, the way that we process information, the communication of information in the realm of Scorpio really wants to get to the bottom of something. Investigative reporting is something that always springs to mind with something like Mercury and Scorpio. Mercury also, or Hermes, was the only deity in the realm of Greek and Roman mythology, the only deity that could go into the underworld, which would be the Scorpio realm, could go into the underworld and come back out. No other, not even any of the other Olympian gods could do that. Only Hermes, right? And in some stories, you see that Mercury or Hermes is a shepherd of souls into the underworld, right? In case you're getting lost in the bardo, it's Mercury or Hermes that brings you in, takes you where you need to go, but is able to escape, because light is separate from darkness, right? And Mercury and Hermes as, you know, some sort of personified experience of riding the light frequency, moving at the speed of light, you know. And that's, I feel like that digital signals, the actual consciousness itself is able to do that. So, but in the sign of, I digress, right? I could talk astrology for hours and hours. So Mercury in this sign of Scorpio as well is already just, you know, really into getting to the bottom of things, investigating, right? Getting and emotionally, right? This is an opportunity to kind of mentally interface what's going on under the surface, peeling back the curtain in some ways. And then to have it in a conjunction with the planet of Mars, which is the other ruling planet of this sign, right? The warrior has the bravery, the courage, and kind of the instinct to just go charging in. And in the sign of Scorpio, sexual energy is a potent power that's generated when you bring people together in that type of relationship. And Scorpio represents the resources that we generate and share through any type of communion, regardless of what it is. But Mars in this sign and ruling it, along with Mercury, coming together at this eclipse. I mean, there's so much energy behind us right now to get us to really push towards something that we feel like is going to give us what we want, right? Something more abundant, a better life. It's like the gold rush in some ways. But then you have Mars and Mercury lined up with this star called Alphecca in the constellation of Corona Borealis. Now, it doesn't look like they're lined up, but in Western and tropical astrology, since it's so based on mathematical geometry, which geometry is all mathematical. It is very mathematical. Western and tropical astrology is very mathematical in the sense that it is about all of the angles that these particular bodies create in relation to their longitudinal placement around our 360-degree dome. Whatever, we have a 360-degree vantage point of a perfect circle, and then we have the zodiac, which is 30 degrees in each of those 12 signs. It's very mathematical and precise when you think about it and you work with it. So yes, they're not lined up like the sun is with Mercury and Mars, but they are lined up longitudinally with this, and they create a conjunction because they are lined up longitudinally. They create a line from one point to another. So when you have planets or other placements that line up with these fixed stars, they have their own energy too, and they have their own experience. And so the Corona Borealis is exactly what it sounds like. It's the crown, and Alphecca, this particular star that is at 12 to 13 degrees Scorpio, which is where Mercury and Mars are going to be in lining up within the next 12 hours after this eclipse. It's the main jewel in the crown, right? And so there is a lot of drive and ambition and identification with right now those Scorpio themes of like you have to go deeper and you're driven by passion and yearning to get more, to have more. And we know that leads to a number of different outcomes, but there's a lot of darkness here. And the thing about the eclipse, it kind of reminds us that there is a shadow that's cast when there's light, right? That we can't forget about it. And that's what you really learn as you go deep into the Scorpio realm, or the 8th house, for instance. And so the jewel of the crown is the reward that is yearned for in Scorpio, whatever it is. And it can go either way here. And with all of this energy that is being driven right now at this eclipse, knowing that these decisions that are made and what is generated will ripple out for the next 6 months. It's a very precarious time. And I feel like this eclipse window has been very important in terms of establishing for ourselves if we are prepared to accept responsibility for what gets set into motion at this time, because it won't be a quick in and out or whatever. It's likely not even going to have the impact that you even desire, and certainly won't understand it until when? Until Jupiter stations direct. And so we're going to look at that, because that's all still before 2024. The other thing that's happening during this time, and we're going to look at the astrology chart, look at the dates, kind of go back in time. So somebody in the Catalyst classroom on our we have a private Telegram chat group, they get weekly astrology from me. Somebody had really talk about genius, and just talk about people really connecting dots. I was talking about how during this time, Saturn's going to station direct, and so when did Saturn enter its retrograde shadow? And I said, look back, that was a marker. And this person pointed out, oh, that was when the Silicon Valley Bank failed. It was when Saturn first came into its retrograde shadow. So we're soon going to have Saturn stationing direct during this next 2 weeks. That is going to finish out this lunar cycle. We're going to have a Scorpio new moon on the 13th of November, I think, 12th or 13th, and be out of the eclipse window, but then we're going to have a Scorpio new moon. So, I mean, the fun does not end, but this is a very precarious time. And one thing that I have been advising certain people around me that are really feeling this Mars Mercury Scorpio energy, and they're really like the crown jewel here is whatever it is that they want and what they will do and what they will do to get it, and the mental energy that may be expelled or utilized in order to do it. And then the eclipse, it will not go the way that you are intending, unless your intention is to, in fact, leave it up to leave it up to fate, or to cause some sort of manufactured chaos. I could certainly see that, considering that the ascendant of the state of Israel on their natal chart is the degree that the solar eclipse was in. Like, who initiates that type of military campaign in some ways? Or certainly, I mean, it makes sense that they would, quote unquote, be attacked by Hamas on that day. I mean, somebody's obviously paying attention to the astrology when they make these decisions in the military. So, but astrology's stupid. It's so stupid and woo. Nobody believes that shit, do they? So, let's look at the astrology chart. Actually, no. Let's look at, we're going to look at the actual eclipse happening itself. So, and then we're going to get into the astrology of it, because that's why you're here. But I also want to show you some resources, and also just get an idea of where this eclipse is happening, get, 2D and a 3D kind of perspective of like what this means, the shadow is cast, where it's being cast, because those things all matter. Okay, so window capture, and go up to window capture. Here we go. So I'm at timeanddate.com. Just all one word, timeanddate.com. That's just what I use, right? This is not an official sponsorship or anything. This is just me using timeanddate.com. So I actually was going to show you the animation of why it's a partial lunar eclipse, but because it's happening right now, this particular video is truly live, so it's showing you. So what I can do, though, is make this a little bigger for you, and then just kind of give you the rundown of what's happening, which, and most of you probably know this, so please, I'm not trying to insult anybody's intelligence right now, but the Earth's penumbra is the outer shadow, and so the penumbra is definitely covering the entire full moon, and then this is the umbra, or the inner shadow, that is covering the full moon currently right now, and that's what makes it a partial lunar eclipse. And so if you look at the map of where it's actually visible, there are places in the US and Canada, certainly the Northeast, it looks like, has access to visually seeing this eclipse, but you can see that where it's happening here, let's go full screen. You can see where it's happening is, Europe, Asia, and Africa. Even the top of Antarctica. Oh, I wonder what's right there, actually. That would be worth looking into. What is this particular area of Antarctica where there is like almost a point coming down for this eclipse in terms of the shadow it's casting? Ooh, that's fascinating. So you can see, whoops, sorry guys. You can see that the eclipse is happening all through Europe and Asia and Africa. So, and hardly any in the U.S. I mean, certainly Alaska and then the Northeast and Canada, but a lot of the U.S. in particular, and, I wouldn't say a lot of habitated or, lived in Canada. I think most people in Canada actually do kind of live over here. Anyway, I'm getting off topic here. So that's eclipse information. So that's why we have a partial lunar eclipse. And I explained this in the last video. Why do we have eclipses? It's because the nodes of the moon, which are the places where the lunar orbit crosses the ecliptic plane, that's where when the new and full moons are in alignment with those positions, this is why we get eclipses. So in evolutionary astrology, Pluto and the nodes of the moon in your natal chart have a lot to do with where you've been at a soul level, where you're trying to get to, the power that you have at a soul level, which is Pluto. This is evolutionary astrology. So when we have eclipses and these positions are wrapped up in the new and full moons, which have to do with the individual's growth and synthesis of their own duality, there's this undertone of very of unconscious drive. And with all this Scorpio energy, it is, talk about the subconscious and the shadow really active. Again, I will say this throughout this entire video, that, you know, if you're thinking about trying, you know, just realize how much is inflaming and and really motivating a lot of intensity and action that will not be able to be undone very quickly. And won't really truly be understood or expanded upon actively until, like I said, Jupiter stations direct, which is going to be in, I think, almost towards January, so the end of December. So, and just like every other planet that's retrograde now, including Saturn. So that's the, you know, those are the basic mechanics of an eclipse and the path of totality, and there's no shortage of information out there that shows you all that. So let's go to the chart for this eclipse, and just I want to bring up a couple of these particular connections, these harmonics as I like to call them, from where we were, what's going on during these next 2 weeks, and then I will put the little Taurus glyph up, and then we will do the Taurus full moon forecast, because of course the sign of Taurus is where the moon is with the eclipsed moon, and so the earth and the sign of Taurus are very connected. I mean, Taurus is the living soil. It is the earth. It is objective, palpable reality. It is stable. It represents, you know, the lattice structure of material physics, right? So having the shadow of the earth cast upon a Taurus moon is not exactly, I wouldn't say it's exactly terrible. I feel like there's a lot of overlap, you know, in terms of the moon is exalted in Taurus, right? The earth is casting a shadow. So I feel like that there is this familiarity, or at least this idea that materiality will always cast a shadow. That's kind of the contract I feel like we have now coming into this dimension of experience, and bearing light within us, right? Quite literally, light that is generated, photonic light that could be generated from inside ourselves and propagates out as what? DNA. Oh my gosh. Just totally a completely different paradigm of how we bear light. And it's not just conceptual or even symbolic, but quite literal. So, that's a topic for a different video. So, however, part of the contract of being in this materiality, bearing light, is that light casts a shadow. And I don't remember if I mentioned it in this take or not, so I apologize if I did mention it at the beginning. But again, no, sir, I don't. I don't feel like my frustration with eclipse season. I'm just ready for eclipse season to be over. I don't think there's really much genius in that at all. However, the connection you made in terms of that there is light will always cast a shadow no matter what, and in fact it was at the beginning of creation in terms of Genesis that light and dark were in fact separated, and so the dark doesn't even realize itself without light. And there's something about that is really sitting with me during this particular eclipse, that everything in materiality, including ourselves, casts a shadow. And I feel like that a lot of people are ready to act and to communicate from and identify from that shadow place very unconsciously. And the thing is, Saturn in Pisces, once Saturn stations direct, which is only within the next week from this time period, I feel like that will start to, whatever that is, will in fact start to crystallize, and that can't really be undone very easily. So there's a lot of temptation, like I said, with Mars and Mercury, like I said, conjunct in Scorpio. The Sun is here, but it's that Jupiter retrograde down here that is, if we can, I feel like if you can remember and be aware of the fact that there's more of an inner standing that needs to happen here than getting caught up in like what you can generate to get more of. Maybe perhaps being more mindful and patient with yourself in terms of what are the assets that you can develop out of the limitations that you have right here, right? Instead of kind of like having yourself torn away from what you know and what's working in order to get more, because that really satisfies a lot of greed, right? And people don't even realize that they're acting from their own wounds, certainly with Chiron in the picture here, and we'll get to that. But with the Scorpio nature, it's really strong. So what I'm going to do as well is I'm going to share with some mundane kind of astrological reads on what does it mean when Mars and Jupiter are opposite and Mercury and Jupiter opposite. Now, and I think that those astrological transits, those oppositions with Mars and Mercury and Jupiter, especially as it's retrograde, which, it looks like it's moving backwards. So we experience it that way from our vantage point. And Jupiter wants to be expansive and big picture and broadening horizons. And in the retrograde, it's like, well, we have to do that within ourselves somehow. It's not necessarily about the outer alchemy as much as our own inner alchemy in this moment. And Scorpio is about communion. So, but these oppositions can really help to balance that energy if we are aware of them. It's just the eclipse that's in tow. It's like, just be patient, because the challenges and obstacles that we are all emotionally facing at this moment, it seems to me that we can use them as like those limitations can be assets, but it's going to take some time for that to unfold or to naturally progress. And all of the Scorpio energy has people really wanting the prize, the crown jewel, you know what I mean? And I don't know if it's really going to go the way that people think it will go, just because they can push hard enough with Mars and Scorpio and Mercury backing it up with the words is going to be people are very confident, let's just put it that way. So let's go back in time, right? Let's go back in time and look at, because this was a really astute observation by Catalyst Classroom member, like I said, with the in our Telegram group. This person had made the connection that the last time Saturn was at this degree of Pisces, and what was happening during that time, and this is something I spoke about in the monthly subscribers, the weekly astrology report that's available for people who support Catalyst Energies on Subscribestar. So if you're interested in that and you get weekly astrology, you can find out everything you need to know in the description box. Anyway, if we go back to March, we're going to find that's when Saturn was here at roughly 0.5 degrees of Pisces. And that's when it entered its shadow, right? And that means the planet enters the degree that it's going to retrograde back to, if that makes sense. So, look, here we are, early March, and then March 14th, March 11th, really, if you go back, you see everything that's going on here, including that Jupiter and Chiron were conjunct. Venus, even if we go back a couple days, Venus is where the North Node is right now, speaking of nodes, and the eclipse is an eclipsed moon because of how close the full moon is to the position of the North Node, which is, the individual's drive at the soul level or the unconscious level, the North Node of the moon. And right now for all of us, it's at 25 degrees Aries. So we'll go back to that. But that's where Venus was at this time, right? Venus, who rules money and currency, and Taurus, and rules value and worth and beauty and the arts and harmony and sensual pleasure, right? Venus definitely rules pleasure, and especially Aries. That's her counterpart's home territory, right? Of Mars. Anyway, she's here at 23 to 24 Aries, and Chiron and Jupiter together. Chiron, the wounded healer, the hybrid, and this is where Saturn is at 0 degrees. So I went into a lot of detail on the weekly, so I don't really feel the need to go back into that detail because that was for those folks. But what I will say, based on this person's observation, was that this is when the Silicon Valley Bank crashed, and look where Pluto is, the very last degree of Capricorn before it goes into Aquarius. I feel like that this time frame, you know, and this was a marker, right? And right after that we had Jupiter and the Sun were conjunct at 22 degrees Aries. That was opposite the solar eclipse. That was right after this. And then we had a new eclipse season that started April. If you remember, April 20th, there was a total solar eclipse, and there was also, actually, it was a grand square, if you remember. That's like this big deal astrologically. So this time period started something, and this person was just like, oh yeah, that's when the Silicon Valley Bank collapsed. And so just be ready for when, this is a week when Saturn stations direct from at this degree. So we're not far, folks. And I feel like that if you were to make those intent, and some people have made their decisions, right? It's already happened, and they're going to have to live with the consequences. And so will other people. That's the thing about Scorpio. You don't do these things in a vacuum. You come together through better for worse, with consent or without, and you generate some sort of power dynamic that then doesn't stop. It just goes through the rest of the phases, right, of creating culture and creating society and having an impact on the social consciousness, and then eventually the karma. And that's where Saturn in Pisces is going to be. Oh boy, it's going to be we're going to have to live. Things will start to crystallize, right? And it's, you know, there's no going back at that point. So not daily, sorry guys. I want to go back to now. So, and I always want to just be now, right? I just want to be now, because that's really all you have, honestly. But these temporal roadmaps of astrology are very helpful to understanding the now even better. So we're back to the eclipse. So I want to share with you too the Sabian symbol for the both degrees of the sun and the moon, because this always gives context to how a lot of astrologers talk about and come to their conclusions, or how they read things, because a lot of them, including myself, use Sabian symbols all the time. And so the idea is that each degree of each sign has its own signature. It has its own frequency. It has its own image that was intuited for each degree. And so 6th degree of Scorpio, and you always round up for Sabian symbol work. And so anything from 5 degrees in 1 minute up to 6 is going to be this symbol of 6 degrees of Scorpio. So the gold rush tears men away from their native soil. The passionate search for new values, which at any level promise a more abundant life, right? So always at the Scorpio level. And by the way, this is from Dane Rudgers, an astrological mandala. For those of you in the Telegram group, you have access to this PDF. Always at this Scorpio level, the yearning is for an ever more intense and all-absorbing union with a person or a community. A yearning which motivates a search for more effectual means to achieve as total a feeling experience as is possible, right? Scorpio is fixed water. This is all about the depth. How deep does it go, right? How deep does it go? That's the degree of the sun at the eclipse. Now, 6 degrees of Taurus, which is the eclipsed moon, right? The shadow of the earth, and certainly the outer shadow of the earth is covering the whole moon, and there is a portion of the full moon that is shadowed by and it's that area that we looked on the map, right? All that part of the hemisphere of the planet is in that, especially right in the middle, right? Is part of that path of actual darkening of the full moon. So you feel it, but there's no illumination of what that is. There's just darkness, but you feel that there, because there's a shadow cast, but there is still an intense feeling happening. So when I talk about that, imagine here that you can also add the imagery of what I'm going to talk about with 6 degrees Taurus, which is a bridge across a deep gorge. The conquest of this is the conquest of separation through group cooperation. To it's, the bridge shows us and gives substance to our ability and our capacity to conquer obstacles and to achieve continuity as well as expansion, right? It's the idea of using what is there in nature in order to bridge the gap, in order to reach across this deep chasm. And as we and it's in that experience in and of itself that drives people to and gives confidence to people or communities that we can expand further, we can gather more, right? We can create more, generate more together. But it's in the experience of using what is and being challenged by the obstacles to begin with that allows us to even bridge that gap in the first place. So this is also, like I said, this is eclipsed, and when Jupiter, I'm going to show you on the chart, it's going to be before, I'm fairly positive it's going to be before 2024 that Jupiter stations direct, yes, and it's going to be right at New Year's. You can see right here, 5 to 6 degrees Taurus, and if we were to go like a day ahead, I'm pretty sure you'll see that Jupiter will have stationed. Now, at this point, Mercury will be retrograde. Oh, that'll be interesting. In Sagittarius, it's not happy. Mercury is not happy in Sagittarius. It's at its detriment, right? The mind that wants to stay open to just observation and pure logic does. It can be very difficult to come into that state of wisdom or synthesis and be at that self-reflection in some ways. So and Mars, you can see Mars and Mercury will be conjunct again because of the retrograde in Sagittarius. So in a totally different degree. In the meantime, though, here, speaking of the ruling area of Jupiter, that is Sagittarius. So Jupiter stations direct, I believe, the next day, or like New Year's Eve, right? Yep, there it is. It's on the 30th. So we don't even really get to, you can see here. So same degree as the full moon, right? And so when Jupiter stations direct, there is, this kind of stopping point that then starts to expand back out, right? It's like everything deflated in some ways and now we're ready to blow things or expand things. And that can have everything, Taurus, that can mean anything from resources and anything that has physical material value, to the expansion of one's just value in general, understanding value and understanding the value of resource and tangible reality, physical reality. We could just broaden our resource base. But I would say, especially with the eclipse too, I do get this sense that there will be we will have a sense of what it's all been for by the time this happens. And this is not going to take that long. I mean, this is Christmas into New Year's. This will be a moment that's going to be really important moving forward into 2024. So hold fast. Like, yes, the eclipse window is a longer cycle that will take us out to March. And there's some overlap with the eclipses coming into March and April too that we'll talk about later. But this in particular, this Jupiter stationing direct at the same place as the full moon, I mean, it's like this eclipsed full moon is, yeah, there's a shadow cast, but there is some sort of seed being planted or some sort of fire being started, some sort of like kindling that is being gathered right now. I'm not exactly sure, but it's important to know that we may not have it all figured out, but I think there is a patience that we are really being challenged to follow, just to have right now, instead of getting really pulled into that yearning of Scorpio, right? This is where that intensity is where if you don't know your own shadow, this is where you betray yourself in a lot of cases, or you run away screaming from yourself and you're not growing, right? Or then you find yourself kind of pulled into a belief system rather than investigating the truth for yourself and really being able to come back out of the abyss in one piece, right? So we have a couple interesting months ahead of us, and look at that. Pluto will be back at 30 degrees Capricorn, just like it was when Saturn came into its shadow, just when Silicon Valley Bank collapsed. And that's also where Chiron will be back at too, interestingly enough. So Christmas until New Year's, I think, is going to be it's going to be pretty interesting. So but the big part is that's going to be connected to right now because of this lunar eclipse and what it represents, and the ability to like I said, use the obstacles that are right in front of us as an asset to prove that we can overcome them, we can conquer them, and that they're palpable, they're physical, there's something, and they're valuable. That's the thing about Taurus, is about value of what is. And so the earth is valuable, it's full of resource, whether that's your and I'm talking about land, right? Your body, all of the elements that are natural to this existence, right? That there is natural inherent value to all of this stuff. But I think it's going to take a couple months before we really start to understand what the limitation really can be for, right? And I think that we really challenge, and some people, some organizations, some groups, they have already failed unless their point was to cause manufactured chaos, because you don't make decisions like this at an eclipse, in terms of like, I'm going to go to battle. So the other thing I want to talk about, I'm going to bring the, let me hear, before we go into the Taurus full moon forecast. So we're going to look at the next 2 weeks for the Taurus identified people. But what I would like to do is show you again, if I may, the astronomy software. There we go. And the Corona Borealis. And I would love, and I would, I truly, and the people, the Catalyst Classroom, the Starseed Fellowship people, you get your weekly astrology, and I already talked about this, and you can easily find this information on your own at astrologyking, all one word.com, and he has a really good website with all the fixed stars and all of this information. So I am going to share with you some information about the fixed star Alphecca, which is at 12 to 13 Scorpio. This is where Mars and Jupiter, and Mars and Mercury are going to be conjunct. So I'm going to share something with you about that. I'm going to give you some generalized things to consider with these particular astrological transits, so I can impress upon everybody watching, and even if it's you or someone in your life that needs your counsel, that this is not a time necessarily, unless you are really clear about what the jewel in the crown is for you, and it is not a remotely selfish reason. And the only way to do that is that you can't ignore your own shadow, and this eclipse is going to make it impossible. So, and we might find that shadow creeping out over the next couple of months, certainly, or maybe the impact of our decisions won't really fully mature, nor will they expand until about January. So that's the other thing, too. It might just be going along hunky-dory right now, and come Christmas into New Year's, it'll start to really expand and be much more of a presence, right? And hopefully it is a bridge, and not like something that is much more selfish. Okay, so Corona Borealis, it is the crown, and Alphecca is the crown jewel, 12 to 13 degrees Scorpio. for, you know, accounting for precession, which is the 1 degree every 72 years of, well, the wobble, right? Some in terms of the mainstream academic astrophysics, right? It's the wobble of the planet on its axis, and so that's why we move through the different ages, right? The age of Pisces, the age of Aquarius. So we move through each constellation every 2,000 years because of precession. But more ancient texts, especially like Vedic texts, and I'm sure Babylonian and Egyptian, if you really get into it, they knew about precession, that it was much more about our journey throughout the galaxy and not the wobble. So, you know, that's for you to research and figure out for yourself. So, Alphecca gives honor, dignity, and artistic ability. And so it's idealistic, and these are all things you can look up yourself, astrologyking.com. But what I am sharing with you is that this particular star is the crown jewel, and so it has this really honorable, dignified, artistic aspect to it, and it's very idealistic, it's very refined, but it also has the dark side of that, which is rash and obstinate and headstrong, and it can be really dangerous because it's the crown jewel, right? You feel driven to the point where you stop considering the impact on more than just yourself, or you don't even, with the case of Mars in Scorpio, you're not even thinking, right? It is not thinking. Thankfully Mercury is there, but you guys you got to consider that Mars is probably overpowering the rational mind here in Scorpio, considering that it rules this sign. So this star in the crown jewel Alphecca, this star is a very brilliant white binary star. So it's very bright, it's very massive, it has a lot of high frequency light coming off of it. So Alphecca is noted for conveying honor, dignity, and artistic ability, right? So you're going to find this over and over, that it has that side, and then it has the side that it brings out kind of the, you know, those who pursue pleasure and who are just, like I said, obstinate and scandalous and underhanded. But it's also one of the 15 Bohemian fixed stars. Its image is a hen or a crowned man. So you can look that up as well. Which makes sense, a crowned man. We're talking about the crown. That's the name of the constellation. So in its best form, this star, if it's in, especially if you have it in your natal chart in some way, it can be very beneficial and bring out all of these really dignified and artistic qualities in someone. But then it also, depending on what else is going on around it, and considering that it's all wrapped up in this eclipse right now, I feel like we really need to be mindful and very thoughtful about what it is that we are driven to, you know, what kind of power we're driven to, what kind of yearning are we following here. Now, the thing that I think is worth mentioning the most of all of these qualities is that Alphecca rules the lowest vertebra of the spine. And for those of you who know your anatomy, you know that that's your sacrum. The last two lumbar vertebrae of 6 and 7 have fused together in the human spine and create the sacrum. So your sacral chakra, this is the seat of our creative power, which is why it's the jewel, right? It's in the sacrum. And this, I think, is really important in terms of recognizing that this is also, thankfully, Mars and Mercury are not like sitting right on top of the star, but there's still a conjunction, and that is important. It is the seat of your creative power. Your sacral chakra is the thing that drives you to reproduce, right? It is the seat of your sexual power and your energy. And that energy is vital regardless if it's used for procreation or to create something. And if it is getting utilized to move towards some sort of goal that is disempowering other people, that is violent, I mean, this is also comes out of this, you know, to take power away from others in order to get more for yourself. This is not going to go the way that people want, but they will be ruthless. So And of course, if you're following the weekly astrology, then we talk much more about the week to week and what the moon is doing, and especially its relationship to Pluto, because it usually brings this stuff up to the surface. So, what I would like to do, so we talked about Alphecca. I would like to bring up some general, just some, where am I at here? Just some general information about these particular. Here's my notes about these transits, because like I said, it's not just the eclipse, it's Mercury and Mars together in Scorpio, and they're going to be in an opposition to Jupiter, and all of that has their own incredible implications. Let's just put it that way, especially Jupiter in its retrograde. So Mars and Jupiter opposite, and some of the general ideas here, general themes. Again, you can find this stuff on astrologyking.com. This type of transit, it's actually one of the luckiest opposition transits. So when you have Mars and, let me bring the chart back up. I'm so sorry, because this will make more sense when we're looking at the astrology chart. There it is. So when you have Mars in opposition, and we're going to go to the appropriate date right now, not December 30th, although that's something to keep in mind, that leading up to after Christmas, leading up to New Year's, seems like it's a pretty important moment here because of Jupiter's stationing. So, but let's go back a couple months to now, which would be 2 months basically, and look at these oppositions. Okay, you can see the big, bold red line for those of you who are still learning astrology. These big, bold red lines are oppositions and squares usually. So oppositions do exactly what it sounds like. They create all this energy because they're pulling in opposite directions. So, but when you have Mars, the warrior, and Jupiter, the, basically the leader or the lawyer, Jupiter is the teacher. Jupiter is the, it's Zeus, right? He's the one that runs the show in the mountain. So great CEO, Jupiter, right? Or a lawyer, management, top management is Jupiter. So when you have Mars and Jupiter that are opposite each other, it's actually one of the best opposition transits you can get, because they're balancing out this energy that otherwise in either direction could take you too far. So, but it does increase your self-confidence and desire to win. That is a really important key phrase when we're thinking about all this, a desire to win. Wanting more out of life, you will be willing to take risks to get there. Now, I'm not trying to suggest that these are negative traits. I'm just letting you know that with an eclipse in tow like this, you'd be very mindful about what it is that you want to win and what is it worth to you. As we're talking about Taurus and worth, this is one of the luckiest opposition transits, Mars opposite Jupiter, but it can also bring your undoing if you get selfish, overconfident, or overstretch your resources. I'm telling you, folks. Be mindful. Have you looked at your shadow lately and your subconscious? How much of that is motivating a lot of this? You will feel adventurous and strong and competitive. And that's the other thing too. Like if you need these types of qualities because you're about to, take a risk on something, that you really do want, that is in alignment with like the grand design, right? That is about supporting humanity and, maximizing your potential and doing it in a way that actually supports other people, then this is great energy. Just remember, there's an eclipse, right? There are these unconscious forces that thankfully are pulling us towards where our soul wants to go, where it's being pulled to in order to grow and evolve. It's important to remember self-control, humility, and patience, right? We've been talking about this whole time. So your natural tendency will be to act on the spur of the moment and risk it all. You will feel sure of yourself because of increased strength, courage, and popularity. These are great things to be happening as long as you are working for the betterment of other people and really blending cooperation with this increased desire to win and being considerate, like really truly being considerate of others. And as much as Neptune and Pisces is just like, oh, what's happening? It's a great opportunity, honestly, to allow yourself to really not just be considerate, but be able to truly empathize so that you don't find yourself being very aggressive and selfish and being overconfident, and then like really making, like doing damage that can't be undone. So, and that comes from at least being considerate of the needs of others. Try to blend some cooperation with your increased competitiveness. In this way, you will be sure to succeed and have your strongest desires fulfilled, right? There's nothing wrong with the desires, but the means in which we go about it. So as long as you don't overestimate your abilities and your resources, there's a lot of success. It's the Jupiter that's retrograde that I would say pay attention to. It's going to station at the same degree as this eclipse, so maybe something is not quite done baking, if you know what I mean, right? Now, Mercury opposite Jupiter brings big ideas and grand plans. Feeling optimistic and friendly, you have ideas and you cover a lot of ground, right, when you have these two opposite each other, because they're naturally in opposition. But you also may want to narrow your view, take on fewer projects. I would say with the Jupiter retrograde, you better make you the project right now, or internalize it a little bit, because otherwise you have this tendency to skip over the details, or think that you can handle more than you can. Ooh, I think that, again, the Jupiter retrograde is going to help with this. So this is a great time for questioning your own plans and your beliefs. I think that that's a great idea. Others may ask or challenge you, forcing you to examine your weak spots. This is not terrible. And especially if you're in the flow of doing this already, this isn't going to be that difficult. So your beliefs or opinions that are too far from social norm may cause controversy. Again, that's not a terrible thing. You just have to be prepared for what that actually means, or what kind of impact it's going to have on your daily life. You may need to find a balance between being too provocative and being too dull. I don't think that's a terrible thing, and I think that there are ways to use this energy in and of itself that could be very beneficial. Just keep in mind the eclipse. All I've told people, honestly, I was like, well, whatever you're planning on doing that kind of has got all that Scorpio like intensity to it, just wait until the end of the weekend and see how you feel about it then. So, and then you have Mars and Mercury together. And this is where, the jewel of the crown comes in here. Increases mental activity. So it's really good for focused and acute thinking. If you got something that you got to really focus and get into the bottom to, this is great, these two together, especially because the Sabian symbol for 13 degrees Scorpio is the inventor in your lab, right? The ability to relate seemingly unrelated facts is how you actually get deeper into the truth, right? The driving or urge toward achievement, which is at the root of civilization. That's what this degree is about. So it's not like having this increased mental activity is a piercing intellect to argue your case. It's not like it's a bad thing, but you can defend others instead of using it to be on the offensive, because there will be an aggressive nature and certainly a defensive nature to everyone's thinking. So if you think you're going to just step into a situation and somebody's going to be like, you know what, you're right, like, I'm glad that you came here being really assertive. No, it is not going to happen, especially if you try to do it over this eclipse. Everybody's going to be either defensive or aggressive in some way. So, and rapid response time with Mercury and Mars together like this. And not even the least of which is the fact that, that they're in Scorpio. So just like turn the volume up on all of this stuff as I'm reading it to you. There's more significant potential now for getting into arguments, losing your temper, and being unnecessarily rude or abusive. Oh my God. These attributes are acceptable in a fight, but not helpful in social settings or between partners or anything that you are trying to, bridge a gap with, that Taurus full moon that's being eclipsed. So the key to handling this energy, right, is gaining self-awareness of the fact that this energy is building within you and being aware of your own shadow being cast. And so you may be on the other end of hostility. Get yourself away from it. Whatever it is, threats, abuse, intimidation, you don't want to back down either. And that's the other thing about this type of, it gives everybody this confidence and this kind of like, you know what, I'm not going to take this shit, right? And so just be aware of that as well, that if you're used to people backing down, you may not get that. And in this transit gives a huge tendency towards acting before thinking. Like I said, right, Mars comes before Mercury, Aries comes before Gemini in astrology. So just be aware of these things, okay? This is just kind of the general theme here along with this eclipse. Oh my God. So the other things are in the next 2 weeks are the fact that, you know, you're going to see Venus and Uranus come into a trine, an Earth trine, and Saturn's going to station direct on the 4th. So now what I'm going to do is we're going to switch over to the Taurus full moon forecast. I'm going to move the camera, the webcam image down here. And so if you are not here for the Taurus forecast, well, I'm going to bid you adieu. Thank you for being here for this partial full moon lunar eclipse report. And, you know, you can always subscribe. You can like the content or share or comment if you feel like you want to support this channel growing, of course. And then everything you need is in the description box below. But let's move forward, Taurus, to your full moon forecast. So if you're unfamiliar with this format, every month I do a new moon and full moon forecast for the sign that particular lunation is being represented by. So our full moon, even if it's eclipsed, is in the sign of Taurus this month. And so I am reading this forecast for the full moon, or the people who are identified with Taurus. So Taurus sun, Taurus moon, Taurus rising. Anybody with strong Taurus in your chart, we're going to bring up the actual Taurus rising chart here, and that's what I primarily read is the Taurus or the rising sign. But anybody with sun and moon in the sign is still going to be very identified with how things are going to be affecting them. So and always with a full moon in that particular sign, we're pretty sure and pretty aware of the fact that the next 2 weeks is going to be very personal to those individuals as the moon moves through the bottom of your chart, which is individual identity and expression. So the full moon reveals something about you, Taurus, about you and how you project yourself into the world, and there is a shadow being cast. Well, the thing is, the shadow is coming from the very earth, which is what you are most identified with. Taurus is fixed earth. And so in some cases, there's a familiarity here. And I talked about that earlier. But in terms of the forecast for the Taurus people, there's something that you of all signs really identify with the nature of what causes shadow in the first place, which is physicality, which is matter, right? The idea of a shadow being cast means that light cannot necessarily penetrate matter, and so it hits it and at an angle creates its opposite, right? It's negative, which is the shadow. And so Taurus people, you know, because of their staunch and at times very stubborn just nature of being fixed earth, they themselves are the people that kind of force the shadow to be seen when the light is being cast. And so that's a really interesting position to be in. So Taurus, we're going to look at the main themes of the next 2 weeks and just kind of look at the general overview. And I've already talked about the things that are going to be relative in terms of the rest of at least 2023. But even the Saturn stationing, direct at 0 degrees Pisces. This is your 11th house, Taurus. So, I mean, truly at the societal level will this crystallization begin, and it will have certainly its own effects as the moon comes into your sign, is in a sextile to Saturn. So if anything, it's going to be the limitation, it's going to be the crystallization of the societal networks that you're part of in terms of the karma, right, with the Pisces, as I talked about. That's really, I feel like, going to have an impact on who you are, the person you identify yourself as, how you feel, and how you're projecting yourself into the world. Of course, you have Jupiter and Uranus here in your first house, in your sign. So there's also this very internalized, maybe not fully formed aspect of who you are, and Jupiter and Uranus. Gosh, Uranus transiting a first house is just constant upheaval of the person's identity, in all kinds of ways. Like there's never any, and it's always just this restlessness. And a Taurus person doesn't want to be restless. They are fixed earth. They're Ferdinand, sniffing the flowers, right? They are the bull in the field. But, as we know, once they start moving, once you get that person to anger or to react or respond, they're not slowing down. It's like a mudslide, or like the way, the P waves of seismic activity. You're not just going to stop it once it's going. And Uranus is just constantly just like, little thunderbolts everywhere, and things that you can't control, and aspects that are, creating shifts in your very identity that have just been, I think that it's just been, oh, Taurus. Oh, boy. I'm sorry that you have this eclipse, but let me tell you something. Again, it's in the limitations that you're experiencing in your relationships, Taurus, and the drive in terms of who you are in relationship. It's intense, right? But it's in those situations that you yourself are going to discover that the limitations are exactly the assets that are going to help you grow as a person, right? And to expand as a person, and to like basically make quantum leaps as a person, as an individual. But it comes through the relationship and who you are in relationship. So Taurus, all the Scorpio energy here in your 7th house. I mean, like, Taurus people are just so intense in their relationships, and they have all this energy here, especially with Mars. I mean, you just have really been maybe too intense for people. I'm not entirely sure. So just be aware of how much that is, influencing influencing your relationships, the power dynamics. I think that's going to become a lot for Taurus people. That's going to become a lot more relevant and accessible when everything starts moving into Sagittarius, which is in the next month or so. So in the meantime, it's in the relationship that you feel this part of yourself, like, just this intensity and this drive. But there are aspects about who you are that are really, I don't want to say they're just, with all the retrogrades, it's a lot of internalized experiences. And of course, now with the eclipse, there's aspects about it that are shadowed, that are going to be coming, forward in the next couple of months. Let's look at the general theme here. Just kind of do the day by day over the next 2 weeks, Taurus, just to see where things are going. So Venus, of course, is in Virgo and is going to have this trine, actually, to Uranus. Let's see here, on the 31st, right, on Halloween itself, Tuesday the 31st. You're also seeing, the moon's going to come into Gemini, as it does. But this is the big one, Venus trine Uranus. So one of the things about this transit, well, two things. Number one, you got Venus in the 5th house, right? And so artistic endeavors, this sense of value of the creative, authentic voice and our creative channel has just been really, like, you've been really working it, I think, Taurus, because Virgo is about work and is about putting your resources to work. And Venus is your ruling planet. You are a Taurus. And so this trine over to Uranus in your sign, I think, is going to be really favorable for the Taurus people. In terms of also something about you is changing with Uranus in your 1st house that is going to trigger some sort of urge to try some sort of new creative thing, right? And expect the unexpected, Taurus. And I think, whether it's a new relationship, especially Venus in the 5th, right, that you get very charismatic and very magnetic and attractive. And in Virgo, it's very pragmatic, I feel like, too. But also that you've really been working and really valuing the work on your creative potential, that I feel like there's something that's going pop up, and expect the unexpected, which is nice because there's so much more here that is really intense and not exactly easy to manage right now. But this is something that's gonna, especially creativity. Wow, there's gonna be a lot of stimulation here for the Taurus people to have your chart ruler be in this trine to Uranus in your sign, or in your first house. And so creativity is really stimulated because that's what the fifth house is all about: your creativity, your creative expression. So it's also romance and dating, and it's also when you take risks or when you experience joy or excitement or thrill. These are all fifth house. It's playful. It's children. So Venus here, I mean, creativity is really stimulated, and you can experiment with new kinds of dance or art or craft, and it's going to come from something changing unexpectedly within you, Taurus, this Uranus retrograde. So you could start a new relationship. There may be kind of like, I don't know, sexual affairs, and you may even be attracted to moderately dangerous situations. So just be aware that you're trying to satisfy this energy, and because something is changing within you. But I feel like that this is for the most part a good thing, and just realize that the urge is going to come from within you, and it's not fully, it may not necessarily be a rapid change, but something within you. You're going to get this kind of hint of something changing, and it's going to have a really strong impact on changing or stimulating your creativity right now. This is really nice. So that's on Tuesday the 31st. That's a great transit to have over this time period. Now we get Taurus. And even if you're not a Taurus, you're about to get like a good look at the week ahead, if you still happen to be listening, and you're just learning astrology, and that's why you're listening. So the 3rd is going to be another big transit, and we're going to see, well, there's a lot actually. So the 4th is when Saturn stations. Actually, it looks like Saturn's stationing on the 3rd, and then we'll start moving direct on the 4th. And then you have, remember the 5th of November, right? The gunpowder treason on the 5th of November. So this is a really intense time too. So what's happening? Well, the sun will be opposite Jupiter, so we'll break that down. There's that 1st and 7th house again for Taurus. Venus, we just talked about, opposite Neptune in your 11th, so we see that there's some opposition between the gift that you feel that emanates from within you, and that's often our creative potential, and the receiving of that gift by our peers, which is the 11th house. And so this opposition we got to break down too, because at this point there's going to be, I think, and the moon in Cancer will also be stabilized. So there'll be this emotional stability here, but this tension that's getting created, I think, is worth paying attention to. And this next weekend is going to, we have Saturn stationing direct, and then we have the 5th of November. I just feel like that this next week, Taurus, is going to, there's going to be some things at the social level that are going to really challenge your ability to stay focused on that creative, authentic expression down here in the 5th house. So, and then something in relationship that comes up that is really going to be challenging you. So the sun opposite Jupiter, right? I think it's really going to break down to, in many ways, that when you have the sun opposite Jupiter, it does bring opportunities for success and good fortune and increased happiness, right? So you just have this really nice Venus trine Uranus, and you're like, ooh, I'm feeling this urge to try something new, or to go in a new direction, or to try, maybe start, go on this date, whatever. Whatever it is, you're going to feel that kind of like, ooh, something's shifting and changing within me, and it's actually stimulating my creativity. Then you get this sun opposite Jupiter, which can be very successful, or opportunities for success, and everything may fall into place. Now we're talking about you and who you are in relationship, whatever relationship that is, and so everything will fall into place without much effort, leading you to believe you are on a lucky streak, or gifted somehow. If you let an excellent fortune go to your head, now this goes back to Alphecca as well, because this is very close to Alphecca in terms of the sun, right? Remember, Jupiter and Mars were both Mars and Mercury were both opposite Jupiter, basically at this degree. And so now the sun is here. And you may find yourself, if you let this go to your head, even if you have a little bit of success here, you could find yourself suffering embarrassment or loss, and it could really affect your self-esteem. And this is where, the sun has a lot to do with that. So this transit can lead to greed and envy and extravagance and waste and excessive pride. Sun opposite Jupiter, right? Wanting more and more can leave you feeling unsatisfied and like you're missing out. So you understand that you could really find yourself getting pulled into success or this seemingly lucky streak in a way that actually is going to be really destructive and detrimental. So you're going to feel unsatisfied and you're going to want more and more. And if you already have problems with self-control with a transit like this, especially the sun conjunct Alphecca, this can be your undoing. And so there's going to be like this another wave of it coming through. But if you're shy or kind of pulled back or conservative in any way, you'll be very grateful for the wins, and you share the spoils. You become very charitable and giving, and this transit would then indicate a reward for previous good deeds. It's very karmic in some ways, in service to others, increasing your happiness and confidence. This sun opposite Jupiter. So the Jupiter retrograde in Taurus, that's like, I'm going to water my flowers here. I think that if you're willing to, if you truly have this humanitarian component to who you are and really wanting to, make that effort to help, I do feel like that you will be given the resources to do that, right? But if you are trying to say, where's that humanitarianism actually coming from, and like what's motivating it, I think is going to be it's going to say a lot about how this transit works out for you. And it might not be as obvious because of the retrograde of Jupiter, but I would also say that you might there might be a lucky streak for you, but if you let it go to your head, or you kind of get all caught up in it, it could really go wrong. And so paying attention again to what's happening now, and then next weekend, how there will be kind of, there will be some kind of good luck, and there'll be that Venus trine Uranus for you. And then there's going to be this, that you're going to be like, I am lucky in, I'm getting the spoils of all of my previous efforts. But again, don't let it go to your head. And it may not be exactly what you think or want it to be. So the Venus opposite Neptune that's happening at the same time is also giving me caution, because this indicates that you can have problems with relationships and finances. Now, we're talking about the 5th and 11th for the Taurus rising, which is your creativity and those who receive the gift of your creativity, which is your peers. Your 11th house is your social setting as a whole. And so when Venus is opposite Neptune, Venus ruling your relationships and finances, and how the value of those things in terms of your authentic expression. The thing is, society as a whole, Neptune and Pisces over there, I just feel like it could really just dissolve any of the gains that you feel like you've made, or dissolve your confidence in being able to kind of hold yourself together in the face of, all of it blending together, right? So you're more likely to fall victim to predators who seek to take advantage of you in a situation when Venus is opposite Neptune. So that's the other thing too with the sun opposite Jupiter. You know what I mean? Like, you may get this windfall by next week, Taurus, and then you may also find that just as quickly it attracts people who want to take advantage of you, and this is it's got psychological operation written all over it. People may see your niceness as a weakness, appearing more loving or generous than they actually are. Venus opposite Neptune often will have people over-idealizing or being gullible, and then you get disappointed and embarrassed, or you have real financial loss. And considering we are talking about Virgo, it is our works and our labors versus, the surrender to everything that has been generated as a result of individual works and labors. So you need to be more aware of the potential dangers of schemes and offers during this time, especially with the sun opposite Jupiter. It may not, like I said, it may not be what you actually want. You want to be able to water your flowers, you know what I mean? Or you want to be able to exercise that humanitarian energy and identify with it, but there's something you're taking away maybe from your ability to take care of your own front yard. You know what I mean? So, and there will be elements kind of taking advantage of this and taking advantage of you and your genuine charisma and magnetism. It's almost like you'll be kind of attracting. And the thing about Virgo is it can be very innocent and sometimes a little naive. Being generous and giving also has its problems. There's no time to be a martyr. And that's the other part of being Virgo and Pisces is this martyrdom. Like, you aren't really an American if you don't, like, do this. And I have some, or whatever, right? That's just an example. You know, you're not really supporting this, that, or the other group unless you are doing this or giving us your resources or your time or those that you value. Oh, I'm getting a really, I do not like what this might mean for certain things. So you can satisfy your needs for love and joy through other means with fewer risks with this at this time, right? So even though Neptune in the 11th house is just, you know, bringing the humanitarian aspect, you know, to the your networks, your social peers, and just basically dissolving all boundaries here. You could experiment with things like fashion or hair or makeup. These are just examples, like, because the other thing too is that Neptune kind of rules glamour and film, and so there's also that glamour and film in terms of society and what is real for you, Taurus. And maybe because you are there's this sense of almost innocence and playfulness with Venus in the 5th house, you may and a sense of risk taking. Just be very careful, guys, what you are really allowing your energy to go into, because it could be over idealized and then you put yourself in real harm's way or potential danger. So, like, be aware of potential dangers of like a dating site would make a lot of sense for the 5th and 11th house opposition here. So please be aware of this. There's no time to be a martyr. Now, but the thing is, the sun opposite Jupiter at the same time on the 3rd really sets this up. So I feel like the moon in Cancer making this trine to Neptune might be something that, like, where you can tap into your inspiration and your intuition and get breakthroughs in terms of your imagination and creativity that has much more to do with just like what's right in front of you, or the moon, you know, seeing patterns that you often don't see, right? Oh, I think that's really important with the moon in Cancer for you, Taurus, especially in your 3rd house like this. You know, when the moon goes through the 3rd house, you pick up on patterns in ways that you don't, like your rational mind doesn't, right? The moon in the 3rd house has got, you know, a strong connection maybe to Mercury. And so when Mercury and the moon work together, they're in a trine, they're in a sextile, you really have a balanced approach with rationality and intuition. And I feel like the moon here in a trine, right, 120-degree angle to Neptune, is going to allow for the pattern recognition and your kind of like more intuitive impressions to be really strong, as long as you are rooted and grounded and like kind of emotionally grounded, so that you can pick up on those things. Because Venus, on the other hand, in Virgo, she's like, oh, I don't, you know, I just want to do the right thing here. I want to say, you know, I want my energy to be going to the right place. And Neptune in 11th, at least it's retrograde, not for much longer. The fog is going to thicken. So, boy, oh boy. And that's the thing. You'll want to do the right thing, is because you're going to have access to Taurus, especially in terms of relationship, like something that's just going to be like a lucky break. And you're going to be like, I want to do the right thing. And it's going to be, I feel like, a little confusing. But this moon trine Neptune, I think, is going to be very important in terms of how, what it is that you're intuitively picking up on in terms of these, you'll be able to pick up on the social patterns that actually exist instead of getting caught up in, like, maybe the illusion of some things while the moon is going through Cancer. That's just, I feel like that's going to be one of the, grounding forces for you, Taurus. So that's going to be on the 3rd, because when we come to the 4th, this is where Saturn is going to start crystallizing what's going on here. And then you can't be willfully ignorant anymore. None of us can, but for the Taurus rising, you definitely can't, because, the 11th house is the social consciousness as a whole, and Saturn's about to make it, it's about to crystallize it in terms of, for Taurus people, and it'll be like, okay, this is what it's set now. The pattern is setting, right? It's like, putting the Jello mold in the fridge. It's now starting to solidify. So this is such an incredible time in Taurus. Again, something breaking loose in terms of you and your identity and who you are in relationship. It's going to seem like a lucky break, and you're going to want to just, the creativity and what you have to offer, society in general, and the value of those things. I just feel like, be very sure with yourself, please, as everybody needs to be, but certainly Taurus. Boy. So Saturn stations direct on the 4th, and then the 5th actually is our 3rd quarter moon in Leo. So, and the next really big transit is going to be, again, Venus. Like, Venus is really active during this cycle. So it's very interesting, being that she's your chart ruler. We really want to pay attention to the chart ruler and the planetary ruler for any of the forecasts I do, because those planets usually are the most direct connection to the individual. So for the Taurus people, Venus is really, your representative. So she's going to trine Pluto on the 6th of November. And this adds intensity and passion in your relationship. And where is Pluto? It's finishing in the 9th house, and will soon exit the 9th house for good in our lifetime, for the Taurus people. And so this is your belief system, or your synthesis, or your the alchemy, the big picture. So Pluto, the power has really been, for the Taurus people for a long time, has been, you've been going through this process and experiencing this process of the belief system, or the realm of wisdom and broad horizons, like going through the destructive aspect of alchemy and regeneration. Like, in order to get that spark of fire, like, it has to burn the fuel, right? And that's where the power comes from. And Pluto, represents that aspect of death. I don't know. I just feel like this trine here with Venus at the end of Virgo hitting Pluto like this, there's an intensity not just to relationships and the passion for relationships, but the meaning of them is the intensity, right? And you feel more deeply about the people that you're in social relationship, whether it's a spouse or any loved ones, especially your partner. But I would say too, it has a lot to do with what, again, we're talking about Earth here. And of course, you're an Earth sign, so this is going to be so intense for you. This is a good time for intimate relationships due to your increased desire for love and affection. Venus trine Pluto. And the meaning of it, the meaning of those relationships, that's what the 9th house is. Like, you discover meaning and conclusion and wisdom, because you discover the meaning of relationship in and of itself. And when you have Venus trine Pluto, you have this mysterious sexual attractiveness. There's a strong karmic pull. New relationships are very likely, and they can be long-term during this time, especially when it comes to Venus in the 5th house and, like, the deep meaning of the relationship. But also obsessions and fascinations are very possible. and not only in relationships. So, and then since we are talking about money as well and the earth signs and resources, money may be an issue now where you may feel compelled to research wealth creation schemes or choose a good investment. And maybe it's in the process of going into business that you are starting to realize that you can attribute or contribute, I should say, your own creative voice, your own authentic expression is motivating you to extract power and resources from, the pursuing of wisdom, or the ninth house, travel, long-term travel, higher education, right? Advanced training, all of those things. There's an incredible amount of power that can be extracted from those pursuits. And this trine is going to be like, oh yeah, like I can find personal joy in this process. So again, Taurus, I mean, there's a lot of potential here. Now Mercury is in a trine to Neptune. You can see here, that's coming into focus here during this time. So we've had our third quarter moon. So the moon was in Leo, which is, the fourth house for you, Taurus, which is, where you feel safe and secure, your home and family. So what do I do? Do I, you're feeling deeply and you're very sensitive to, your character and your self-esteem. Whereas the sun in Scorpio is just like, yeah, but what about who I am in the relationship, So you're going to have those things to deal with, just like the rest of us. But it's this Mercury trine Neptune that is, again, it's going to stimulate a lot of creativity, imagination, and in terms of who you are in relationship via the, society as a whole. And so, you just become really sensitive to vibrational energy already. And then it's a water trine. So it's even going to be that much more poetic and sensitive and emotional in terms of this connection. And your communication skills get very soft and non-threatening when you have this, especially Mercury and Scorpio. Oh my, I just feel like you'll be able to really make swift movements in the way that you are kind of conceptualizing, and your ability to kind of feel into what's going on in your relationships, right? Because that's the seventh house. And so Mercury in the seventh house, often you learning a lot from relationship. And in fact, you're going to adjust yourself in relationship really swiftly, I feel like, from this trine. And because you become increasingly sensitive to vibrational energy in your relationship and society as a whole, like that's going to be something you're going to be very easily able to tap into, because your senses are very finely tuned and you can communicate very non-verbally in your relationships, and maybe you are able to translate what's happening at a societal level and adjust in your relationships very seamlessly, because you have this water trine, and it helps you see and feel the bigger picture. And that, again, is going to help you adjust yourself in relationship. This is really important too. Wow, this is an important time for the Taurus people to learn about themselves, truly, during even these next 2 weeks, because the new moon is in Scorpio, which means that you're going to set some new parameters and intentions around who you want to be in relationship. Now, when we get into the 10th and 11th Scorpio, this is where it's going to get, Taurus. This is where it's going to get, as we're getting into our balsamic moon, basically. So the end of the lunar cycle. What are we going to see? We're going to see Mercury come into Sag and square Saturn, that's now direct. And so this is their first, troublesome Saturn transit other than moon transits. So Mercury's at its weakest now in Sagittarius, is going to square Saturn, and it's going to be very difficult to communicate your plans and ideas. There's going to be a lot of negative thinking. I feel like that Saturn now direct, it's really going to dampen what otherwise would be like a spark, and we're going to have a really hard time, communicating what we're getting at. So I do feel like that this particular transit, it's going to be really good to just know ahead of time that maybe you should just work on your own. Don't rely on other people, what they're saying, and don't dig a hole for yourself. That's the other thing I would say. So maybe there's some distance or separation in relationship. Just be aware of that, and maybe you need to focus in and focus on yourself in that moment. Or maybe it's the crystallization of Saturn in Pisces that's going to be a real kind of like dampening effect to what otherwise would be a spark of kind of like, oh yeah, this is what it's all for. So, but you might have to just tell yourself that, you know, or there could be gloomy thoughts, bad news, loneliness. You have to be aware that this is going to, you know, really lead to some negative thought patterns. So don't make it worse for yourself. And this is on the 10th, right? And so the 10th and the 11th, we're all in our balsamic moon phase, and this is where Mars comes into opposition with Uranus. And this is right, as you can see here, right at the end of this lunar cycle. And where is this? So Mercury will be coming into your 8th house, Taurus. And so that's where Mercury starts to have usefulness in terms of going into the spaces of sharing and communion. There's a mental objectivity and clarity that Mercury can have. And it's going to be difficult because Saturn in your 11th house is going to be like, yeah, but this is how it is now. And so it may be a little bit of like, man, I got to go into this space now and really deal with this, with, you know, taking my emotions out of it as I mentally traverse my own shadow. So that's going to be difficult. And then you have Mars opposite Uranus in the 1st and 7th house, right? Because Uranus is in your sign, Taurus. So this comes back to you again, right? By the time we get to basically Veterans Day. And so what is going on here with Mars opposite Uranus? What do you expect? Well, outbursts of anger directed at those who have upset you in the past. So it's going to come back around again. The anger and resentment may have been building for some time. You can't resist the temptation to lash out and attack. I really encourage you, Taurus, to find a proper outlet for this energy, because otherwise this is where the attacks are going to be pretty strong, and you're not going to be able to control anything because we got Uranus involved here. So the best use of this energy is to think twice before lashing out. That's just all there is. Use some tact and strategy before reacting to provocation. That's the other thing too. Don't just go, bah, you know, because you want freedom from restriction. That's Mars opposite Uranus wants the freedom from the restriction. And Uranus is going to be like, okay, here, I'll just shift these things around real quick and give you this feeling of impulsiveness you can't control and disregard in a lot of ways. And so you're going to want to attack people, or they're going to want to attack you. And the resulting disruption and nervous irritability are bound to upset the routine of your life. And we're talking about your identity, Taurus, because it's Uranus in your 1st house and Mars in your 7th. So you're going to want to lash out in your relationships, and because you're going to feel all this impulsiveness within yourself, and it's just going to keep this cycle going. Now, of course, this may be used to your benefit by being tactful and strategic before reacting to provocation. So I feel like that we will all have this experience of being provoked, and this opposition will lead to a lot of outbursts in anger. But those of us who are smart enough to know what's going on here, we can use these tactics to find the freedom that we really want. And I'm telling you, this new moon, it's coming in the mid-November, is exactly the type of energy that we're going to want freedom. We're going to want to obey our own conscience instead of following through with an authoritarian, impulse or regime. And this Mars opposite Uranus can very well be used as a tactical way to defeat anyone, as long as we are, like I said, being strategic and tactical, because Mars is just outburst. But if we can find the appropriate outlet, I think that's going to be the best use of this energy, especially for the Taurus people, right? In your very identity and who you are in relationship. The likelihood of defeat in any battle can also be lessened by using more forethought and seeking guidance from trusted friends, right? So just know, by the time we get to, Veterans Day, leading up to the new moon, some bullshit, I'm sure, is going to go down that is going to trigger this, and feed off of this natural impulsiveness from this Mars opposite Uranus Venus in Scorpio and Taurus. So just know, Taurus, that this is going to go right to the essence of who you are, the person that you identify as, you know, how you express yourself. If you're a sun in Taurus, it's going to all be, you know, those buttons are going to get pushed at the very sense of identity. And the moon's going to be in your 6th house, along with your ruling planet of Venus will be home in Libra. So just remember what it's all for, right? And discipline and a sense of real balance as your work. If you can do that, it's gonna be okay. You can really use this energy for, you know, a positive personal growth. And, you know, I mean, it doesn't get any better than that, honestly. Like, where you personal growth, self-awareness, you know, exiting more and more out of the fog of what we are told we are and who we are, right? But Taurus, there's going to be a lot of challenges to your patience when it comes to relationships over the next 2 weeks, and certainly over the lesson will be over the next couple of months and even to the next eclipse cycle. So just know that the shadow that is being cast is a big part of all of this, and try, I would say, utilize your assets to your, you know, advantage, which is being patient, which is being stable, which is being naturally, you know, connected to your inherent value and worth, right? By being physically present, you know, that and the stability aspect and the patience really sticks out. So Taurus, that's your full moon forecast. And for those of you who are still sticking around anyway, thank you for being here for this entire production. I appreciate all of you very much. Everything you need is in the description box below if you're interested in supporting Catalyst Energies. Soon I will be accepting bookings for personal readings. You'll know if you're subscribed to the channel or you're on Telegram. That's the other thing. Telegram is the only social media I'm really active with in terms of like a daily or a regular. I just share other stuff that I listen to that I think is relevant. So if you're interested in the more consistent interaction through social media, that's where it's happening. But otherwise, I'll let you know. And of course, if you're on my email list, you get those updates as well. And you can book right through my website when I put them back up. But if in the meantime you want regular weekly astrology sent right to you, you can support Catalyst Energies on Subscribestar. So in the meantime, guys, the eclipse has already happened and we are now on the other side of it, and soon the moon will be in its waning period. So thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate all of you very much. I'll see you on the next video. Bye.